The changes to the state's healthcare were announced by the Private Hospitals Association. No official charges have been disclosed, but the overall increases in fees are expected to average between 20 to 25%. From March the 1st, private hospital patients will be classified into groups, with the forecast charges ranging from $180 a day to a higher $900 a day for intensive care. To control costs, the new charges will be based on a user-paid system. The higher the level of care, the higher the cost. Managing Director of Hospitals of Australia, Jeffrey Leonard, says the recommended fees won't be released by the Private Hospitals Association until next week. And for some patients, those costs may be too high. Who will be affected the most by the increased charges?
The people that will be affected most will be those that are in basic health insurance coverage. For the people that are in top level health insurance coverage, there should be no increase in the cost of the patient.
Mr Leonard says many factors have contributed to the rise in charges, needed to maintain a high level of private hospital care.
They are going to rise because of the increases in cost that have taken place in the latter part of 1986, especially with nurses' wage increases of approximately 25%, and also the cost of drugs and dressings, which have increased, and also the cost of overseas plant and equipment that's been coming into the country to go into the hospital system.
Professor Sutherland was trying to bring home to the businessmen that AIDS is a crisis and it is their problem, even if they aren't homosexuals or intravenous drug users. He says the virus is spreading through the heterosexual community and the cost to society will be enormous. He says conservatively, medical bills for an AIDS sufferer will run to about $50,000, but he says that will only be 13% of the total burden. He says another 7% is the cost of screening all blood, and the rest will be through losses in production and not contributing to the tax base. The new drug AZT costs $10,000 a course, and although it doesn't destroy the virus, it does prolong life. And Professor Sutherland says it is worth it because it's this buying of time that may eventually provide a cure.
If you don't put the hand to the wheel, you'll never be able to cure them. So yes, we must treat these people, but in the process we must understand what we're doing. And again, we are incurring a huge liability, a liability in terms of resources, in terms of manpower, in terms of human suffering, and I hate to keep coming back to it, but of course the old bottom line, there's a lot of money required for this, and it's not going to go away.
So you've decided to heed the statistics that more than 85% of drug-related deaths are caused by smoking and are going to give up. But still, you prefer to do so in the privacy of your own home. Dr. Christina Lee from the Faculty of Psychology at Newcastle University says that many people fit into this category.
And the idea
She's
is
devised a program based on other proven systems in which the information is sent to you and a phone call follows up your progress.
I think the hardest thing is not giving up but staying off. It's very easy to give up smoking, but most people aren't properly prepared. They haven't thought about why they smoke, when they smoke, so they're not prepared to deal with the stressful situations or the drink down the pub or whatever it is, and that's when they go back to cigarettes. So I'm trying to help people to recognise when they smoke and why, and to think about what they can do instead.
The retrenchment notices were to be given to workers at the dockyard yesterday, but the employees voted not to accept them and to stay on the job. Overnight, however, the 140 retrenchment notices were delivered by couriers, and so the next step is at 7:15 this morning when work starts at the dockyard. After refusing to accept the retrenchment notices yesterday, will the 140 men simply ignore them today? Last night, Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrick told NBN News that he had heard strong rumours that police were concerned violence would erupt at the dockyard this morning. Police, however, denied that they had brought in members of the riot squad from Sydney in case of any violence. They did say last night that police would be ready if there were any problems. However, Peter Barrick says there will be no violence because the union members had voted to resolve the issue with non-violent protest.
By late this morning, there was still no obvious external sign of any result to the series of meetings which have been taking place at the dockyard. At 9 o'clock, a mass meeting of workers and then a delegation met management to discuss two main points: discrepancies in severance payouts and the continuing claim by the union movement that Premier Unsworth is allowing it to intervene in the retrenchment selection process. This is a point which Works Minister Brereton flatly refuses. He said this morning that the men have been retrenched, those 140, and even if they turn up at the dockyard, they'll not be paid.
Several hundred residents from the townships of Barnsley, Edgeworth and Killingworth turned out at the Barnsley Showground to attend the third public meeting held by the local steering committee. The meeting urged all present to send submissions to the Department of Main Roads by the closing date next Tuesday. The meeting wants the DMR to opt for the so-called western option, which steers the freeway to the west of their areas. That option, however, is being strongly opposed by the residents of West Wallsend, who say it would ruin their environment. The Barnsley Residents Group opposes the two other options, the eastern and central proposals, because they say it will mean loss of houses and quality of life. The steering committee's chairman, Jack Adams, is hopeful the DMR will decide in their favour. When submissions close next week on the 24th of February, what can be done after that? Can anything be done?
Well, there are steps that can be taken after a decision, but we don't believe that there'll be any other decision than the Western route.
After months of fundraising, members from the Newcastle Women's District Bowling Association, the Swansea Workers Hoy Group and the Hunter Valley Cancer Appeal Committee donated nearly $14,000 between them. The oncology unit now has a fibre optic endoscope used to examine tumours in the neck regions. The long tail is placed down the patient's throat where a powerful microscopic lens can detect tumours. Also donated was a specially designed arm lift stretcher, as Dr Andrew Lawson explains.
The patient lifter assists in lifting patients, transferring them from couches to beds and back again. Patients having daily treatment on radiotherapy require a lot of transfer between different beds and couches, and it just assists in the comfort of such transfers, and also avoids injuries to staff and people treating them.
With the arrival of these much-needed pieces of equipment, the oncology unit here at the Mater Hospital is now fully self-contained. It boasts the most modern, up-to-date cancer treatment facilities, valued at more than $6 million.
Chairman of the committee, Lord Mayor John McNaughton, explained that these are celebratory things, designed for the whole community to participate in, and quite distinct from the permanent projects which will mark our 200th birthday into the years ahead.
Well, if you take some time to go through each of them, but we've had the regatta just over a couple of weeks ago, and the regatta committee has got a bigger and better show operational for next year. We've got the Australia Day celebration, which we're going to really make very, very special in Newcastle for 1988. The youth concerts are going to be special. The travelling expo is something which will be most spectacular, just to look at the tents that will be set up to have that exhibition in.
Just tell us a little bit about that. Who's organised that?
Well, that is the National Bicentennial show that will go around to 34 cities and towns within Australia, showing things of historical nature right from our earliest European settlement up to the present time, and the actual tents that have been set up are very, very spectacular in themselves.
Right. Now, what else can we look forward to next year? Sounds like one long party.
Well, it's really is, I suppose, one long party. But there are certain celebrations which are paced throughout the whole of the year to show that we are celebrating our bicentennial, in the two ways. One is on the year itself, and the other is opening the various things that we've built over the last few years to be opened in our bicentennial year.
Put on the ground. Parramatta beat Newcastle yesterday. A good game of football in the Herald Challenge Cup. 6 tries and 6 goals for 3 tries and 4 goals was the final result. Parramatta's captain Peter Sterling was the star
Gives the position away to Leia. Leia away now to Hayward and over the line.
Peter, is harder hit out as you'd hoped for going into the Sydney season?
Yeah, probably a little bit harder than we expected, and that I think that showed in our performance. We were a bit lacklustre out there, but we got the points, and I think a good hard run today certainly put us in good stead for Balmain next weekend.
Cool. It's good to hear that you're a little surprised about Newcastle's strength of this young side that we've got.
Well, I suppose, we came up here and we didn't know a lot about them, and that's always a danger. Really the only guy I knew was the captain, Peter Walsh, and we knew what he could do, and he was outstanding today, I thought. But, again, for Newcastle, it's a good sign with them hopefully coming into the Sydney competition. Probably a place they should have been a few years ago. I think they can go in with a fair bit of confidence.
Meanwhile, Newcastle coach Robert Finch was quite happy but disappointed.
Yeah, the boys played very well. I was extremely proud of their dedication and commitment. A couple of missed chances, penalty try, an intercept try. In this standard of football, you can't allow that to happen.
Young blokes gaining experience, though. They're going to improve by this, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, very, very, very happy with the whole setup. Even like the Colts one, big performance from the first grade side. It all goes well for 88. I'd like to be working on the budget that Parramatta work on 2 million. I think we give it a bit of a shake.
Surprised at how good and how
All emergency units are called in most of the toxic yellow liquid out of smell of chlorine. If exposed to fire or other acids, a deadly chlorine gas is given off. And that's a situation that fire units, police, ambulance and all rescue squads wanted to avoid. The truck was travelling north along the Pacific Highway, about 13 kilometres from Bulladilla, through the area known as the Gap, when the driver noticed flames from the rear end of the cabin. All emergency units were called in when most of the toxic chemicals spilt out onto the highway. The area was evacuated and traffic was banked up on both sides as firemen diluted the substance with water and foam. Dangerous fumes were released and all emergency personnel were forced to wear protective clothing and breathing equipment. The problem was intensified when it was discovered that other chemicals, including sodium metabisulfate used as a sterilising solution, were also on board. It wasn't until 4 hours later that the all clear was given for the truck to be towed away to a nearby clearing, allowing the highway to be reopened.
When chemicals are involved, there's always an unknown factor. It can be quite dangerous, but so far we've taken every precaution and everything is working out quite well.
And I believe one of the policemen was taken to hospital.
I believe a police sergeant was taken to hospital early in the night with with irritation of the throat, and this is one of the parts of this chemical. It will cause irritation of the throat, soreness of the throat. The sergeant, I believe, was taken to hospital, but I think he has been discharged at this time. But
was anybody else injured?
no one else injured.
Some orthopaedic operations, such as total hip revisions, use extra bone to line the joint. Traditionally, bone is grafted from one area and then used on the other. But the grafting process can cause problems. It means the patient loses more blood and suffers more pain after the operation. Lingard Hospital has bought this $7,000 freezer. It will enable bone to be stored and frozen for up to 12 months for use in a range of orthopaedic procedures. Kathleen Holmes from Rathmines today underwent surgery for a total hip replacement. She was the first patient to receive bone from the new bone bank. According to orthopaedic surgeon Dr Lindsay Laird, because of the bank's freezing technique, practically all bone is compatible.
Well, the bone is actually frozen fairly quickly down to minus 80 degrees centigrade, and this destroys the various chemicals in the bone which would otherwise possibly cause rejection.
So does that mean that everybody's bone is compatible?
More or less, yes. There are cases where we don't use bone from one person to another. If the person has any particular disease or transmittable condition, then obviously the bone is not used.
What's happened in the past? Where did they get the bone? Where did you get the...
This afternoon, the dockyard presented a forlorn scene. At first, not a soul to be seen at either the dyke end or the floating dock side. The gates were shut but not locked, and members of management had to make sure they shut it behind them themselves. Over the last few days, unions had been approaching management individually and asking for a change in the policy of retrenching people solely on merit and not at all on seniority. However, management refused to budge, and today, at a mass meeting, the remaining workers decided they had no option but to go on strike, joining members of the Painters and Dockers and the Federated Ironworkers Association, who have been out since Friday. Works Minister Brereton said the union's action in holding a ship in the floating dock to ransom is disgraceful and can only harm the dockyard's chances. Work on the Pilbara was to have been finished on Friday, but the walkout by painters and dockers put paid to that. And who knows now when the vessel will be able to sail again. But more important than that individual aspect is the whole future of the dockyard itself. Now, with the mass walkout by workers, it raises the possibility that Mr Brereton, the Works Minister, will go back to his original threat to recommend to Cabinet that the whole facility be closed down. Soon after the walkout this afternoon, a meeting of maritime, building and public sector unions at Newcastle Trades Hall endorsed the action of the dockyard unions and pledged support, according to Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrick.
The other unions committed themselves to taking the issues down onto the job to the workers because the issues are fundamental. They can, once the precedent's been established at the dockyard, obviously they can be used in other workplaces. So it is the intention of the other unions to take the issues down to the workplace, seek industrial action and supportive action in support of the dockyard workers.
What about financial assistance?
The dockyard workers are going to need financial assistance. It'll be a campaign that could be lengthy. They'll need to produce material, and they'll also need to sustain their members who are out on strike. So yes, that's a very important part of the campaign. And already unions are indicating support in that direction.
Maritime unions are also expected to strike in support of the dockyard workers, with officials due to take a recommendation to rank and file over the next few days. So, far from backing away after Works Minister Brereton's ultimatum, it appears the whole trade union movement is determined to battle on.
This morning the dockyard workers decided to continue their strike indefinitely. They've rejected the government proposal, which they say goes right against their principles of the seniority package. Trades Hall Council Secretary Peter Barrick says the strikes may spread. He says already the painters and dockers have pledged their support, and there's also been support pledged by the Hunter District Water Board workers. Already a fighting fund has been established. But despite this hard line, the unions say they're still willing to negotiate with the government.
The Market Street closure was well anticipated, so the few motorists who still negotiated the changes to their Hilton Valley had no reason to complain. In the last few years, cars going from Wharf Road into Scott Street have only been able to travel east anyway, reducing the attraction. Now, all those who've been wondering why a roundabout was constructed further up Wharf Road will realise it's to form an intersection with the new extension of Watt Street. Opening Watt Street to the foreshore will also allow development of the Customs House Plaza, from Enterprise Park to the waterfront. Stockton people will be able to make use of a free bus service, Route 111, which will circulate from the ferry terminal up Wharf Road, then Watt Street, Scott Street, Hunter Street and Merriweather Street, dropping off passengers at Perkins Street. This will be of particular use to elderly and the incapacitated who cannot negotiate the pedestrian bridge opposite the ferry wharf.
One week ago, the RSPCA seized these two horses from a property in the Hunter Valley. According to the Society's regional inspector, John Carter, they were simply starving to death.
They were just put in a yard and they were being fed occasionally, and the yard was just dirt and manure, and the horses, the reports we had that they were eating their own manure. So we went up into the Muswellbrook area and seized those horses, and it's exactly what we found, and now they're coming back to, without any veterinary treatment, they're coming back now just with good feed.
What would you describe their condition as now?
It's still poor. They've got a long way to go before those horses are back to what we call reasonable condition.
Their plight is not unique. More and more horses are being found in poor condition. Mr. Carter inspected this horse today. It was tethered to a tree in a public park at Stanford Merthyr. After examining it, Mr. Carter said he had taken steps to issue the owners with a stern warning because the tether was unsatisfactory. The horse had also cropped the short grass that it could reach right down to its roots. According to the RSPCA, one of the biggest problems facing some horse owners is that they underestimate the cost of maintaining the animal, around $25 to $30 each week in food alone. But the association says rather than neglect the horse, other arrangements should be made to find a suitable home.
Six runners from Murrurundi began the marathon at 6 o'clock yesterday morning. The Shire President, John Musgrave, was on hand to read a message from the Prime Minister, Bob Hawke.
I commend all associated with Telethon 87 and wish you success in your efforts to ensure a better future for the Hunters region's young people.
The message is encased in the baton and will be passed on at successive towns. First to lead on the 40-kilometre run to Scone was 17-year-old schoolgirl Vicky Hawkins. After a pleasant morning's jog, the group arrived in Scone at midday and the baton was handed on to the Scone team. They ran through the afternoon, arriving in Merriward just before 6 o'clock. A Merriward team of runners will leave this morning to complete the next leg on the way to Newcastle. A team of runners will also leave this morning from Foster. They'll meet with the Hunter Valley runners in Newcastle this Sunday.